You are about to see some UFOs from my collection. Unidentified found objects found on the Thames Foreshore. Here is the first one of my list of unidentified objects found on the River Thames. This is a very delicate object, and I believe it's made of silver. It's quite unusual and very fragile. I've no idea how it actually survived for all this time, although I have no idea how old it is, but it does look like it has age to it. Initially I thought it could be a pomander, something similar to that. Pomanders were considered the ultimate accessories in the 16th century. Most of them were made of precious metals with gemstones. The object I found is, I believe, silver. Although it looks very similar to a pomander in shape and size, when I took it to the Museum of London to be identified by the finds liaison officer, the identification given was unidentified object. So it remains a mystery, although I still think it looks very similar to a 16th century pomander. But it's now in my list of unidentified objects. Next one is what looks like part of a tripod stand with a leg, and at the top there is what looks like a coat of arms, a crest of some sort. I have shown the object to the Museum of London, and the finds liaison officer gave an approximate date, 13th to 15th century. It's a very interesting object. It's rather heavy and it has some interesting details, but it remains a mystery because we can't really prove that it could have been a stand with 3 legs, maybe to hold a pot or a jar, something similar to the photographs we've just seen. next one is this, what looks like a stone. It looks like it has age to it, with a hole going from one side to another. Initially I thought a fishing weight or something, because there are some marks on one side. Although I found this object in an area where Roman potteries had been found before, the finds liaison officer couldn't actually give me a precise identification, not even a date or the purpose of this object. Here is another intriguing find. This particular one looks like a tile that has had some carving done to it, hand carved, maybe a boat. It looks like the shape of a boat, if not a boat, maybe a building or something with some lines going across, up and down, and again the Museum of London couldn't actually give me an identification, and not even the precise date that this carving was made, so it remained another mystery object. The next unidentified object is probably one of my favorites. There has been suggestions that it might have been a pendulum of an old clock, but I have my doubts. I don't believe it is. Other suggestions were that it has a religious connotation to it, perhaps because of the copper-colored voided cross in the center. A Bible reader, for instance. Again, I'm not certain about that. The object is made of copper alloy. On one side of the object, it's clearly visible ring and dots. Ring and dot was a style used quite often by the Anglo-Saxons, and here are an example. I have seen a few objects with the ring and dot motif, dated 5th century to the beginning of the Norman period, 1066 onwards. The Museum of London kept the object I found for quite a long time in order to identify the object. Eventually the object was recorded by the museum, and their unique identification is as follows. White metal plated copper alloy artifact of unknown function, early medieval to modern in date. The object has a circular head with a central void that has a copper colored voided cross in it. There is a length of straight metal that emerges from the head, making the object seem like a flattened pin. The terminal of the shaft is bent forwards slightly. There appears to be no stress fractures in the plating at the bend, so it may be that this is part of its functionality. One face of the head terminal is decorated with 8 ring and dot motifs in a circle around the central hole. The edge of the disc also has a sawtooth design to it. There are file marks visible down both sides of the shaft of the object, the lack of polished finishing suggesting that it may have been part of a larger object or simply unfinished. The next find is possibly part of a lamp or an object that once upon a time was screwed to the bottom part. Next unidentified object is this very small pewter object. Initially I thought it's an ampulla, dated maybe late medieval. When I showed that to the Museum of London, they kept it for, again, a very long time. And although they have recorded the object, they haven't actually decided what the object is. According to them, it could be pewter toy, very common in the 16th century. I have received the object back, but the actual recording of the object has not been published yet because they are still investigating what the real function of this object was. Another find that fortunately I was unable to identify. If you happen to have any idea what that could be, please make comments or share your views. That would be very much appreciated. Next object. It does look like a brooch or a badge of some sort with the initials HVB. As you can see at the back there, it might have been attached to something, but unfortunately I cannot identify what this brooch stroke badge was with the HVB letters and the number 1223. Last year I had a copy of the Treasure Hunting magazine with an article of a person who was trying to identify this badge, brooch. I tried to contact this gentleman, but I never had the reply. So again, another mystery item here. Next, two identical items found around the same area different times. It does look like that it had an attachment which indicates that it's probably a brooch with a book or a Bible above a crown, maybe. It could be a school badge. If it is a badge or a brooch, what's the purpose of the loop at the very top? So it could be a pendant, perhaps. Another mystery item. Another object, very intriguing, which has this glass top, and it's clearly visible that it was attached to something once upon a time. But attached to what? What was the purpose of this object? That is, in a way, a bit special for me, because I found this object on the same day and at the same spot where I found the Victoria Cross medal back in 2015. And so I keep that as a memento, but I have no idea what it is and what it was actually used for. Next three objects, they are crowned visibly clearly, but what's the purpose of them? The first one we've just seen is slightly different from this one here. The reverse is not flat, and the next one is very similar to the one in the middle. There has been suggestions that the second and the third one from the left are probably Royal Mail cap badges. I don't know. Next unidentified object is this, whatever it is. Again, during one of my visits to the Museum of London, I showed it to the Fines Liaison Officer, who could not actually identify what this object was used for in the past. Another object with no identification, which appears to have glasses on one side and the other side. It could have been part of a lens mechanism. Finally, there's what looks like a cartwheel penny that has been squashed to make it look like a square coin. The actual coin, cartwheel penny, of King George III were all produced for 1 year only, in 1797. The object I found appears to have a letter D marked on the surface on one side of this object. If it is a cartwheel penny of King George III with the letter D engraved, it could be someone's initial, but it's still an identified object.